to get them. So like you go and go.
Better late than never. That's why I came in better late than never. Hell nah, cause I was the whole time looking. I'm sleeping.
You almost ended her whole life.
I think it really hurts my head.
Oh, my God. Should have said
I love how Jordan
The pretty ones just say it's girls everywhere. You weren't. Should I have my box? Should I call it? That's really funny. I missed her for someone that Miranda.
See, I always showed up.
We're just gonna get like a whole table. Oh my God, cute guys. Miranda, where are you at? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Everyone, oh my God, wow, cute. Oh my God, thanks you guys. I'm gonna be embarrassing.
You look right at the camera.
Kev, I'm about to look at it.
We can't. I can't.
All right, we're good to get started.
All right, so hello everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Today we're going to be discussing working with international and interlink students. My name is Miranda Tompkins. I'm a GA at UNCG Speaking Center, and we have Charlotte today, who's also from UNCG, Joy, who's also from UNCG, Tam, she's also from UNCG, and we have Sarah, and she's from DePaul University. So kind of a little bit about UNCG and the services that we offer. So UNCG has an interlink program, which is preparing students to be able to read, write, and speak English. There are different levels to this program. And so some of their students come to see us, and we have consultations with them to help them practice their English speaking skills, help them work on grammar, and just kind of build relationships with people around campus. We also work with international and foreign exchange students who want to brush up on their English as well. These students come from all over the world. We have Saudi Arabia, we have some come from Japan, Central America, so just anywhere around the world, we accept them. So now I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the services that they offer at their center.
So I've been a tutor for the past 3 years, and this past year, we had a program called the Pilot Program, and we're working on it having a different name, but it's been really successful so far. We went to International Student Orientation as well as the English Immersion Institute program in the summer before the orientation program, and really trying to recruit students to come to the center to participate in this 9-week program where students can develop skills where they're responsible for the things that they want to work on and improve related to speaking as a whole. So it could be public speaking, it could be how to start conversations in my dorm, how to call different things in the dining hall. So different things like that we really want students to have the responsibility to to come to the center to take on that responsibility and to practice once a week with the same consultant.
All right, so I just want to say before we jump right in, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask. We want to make this as conversational and informative for you guys as possible. All right, so now we're going to throw it over to Joy, and she's going to talk about a little bit about what a consultation with the Interlink student looks like.
Thanks, Miranda. Last semester, I worked with an Interlink student from China. It was the first time that I'd worked with him before, and he was struggling with pronunciation. It was difficult for me to understand him at times, but we still were able to have a conversation, and we still had a good time in our consultation. A few weeks went by, and I never worked with this speaker again. So it had been a few months, and he was still coming to the center regularly, but our schedules weren't aligning, so I didn't work with him. However, about a month ago, I worked with this same speaker again, and his pronunciation has changed tremendously. It has improved tremendously. My name is Joy. I'm a communications consultant here at the University Speaking Center at UNCG. And this story is a little bit of a preview of what me and my panelists would like to talk to you about today. Some of you may have stories like my own. Some of you may have interacted with international students at your own speaking centers. And so with that being said, there are 3 things that I would like to address today in my portion of this panel. So the first one is how to relate to and build connections with Interlink students. The second is fun and new ways that we can reach these students and help them in their English learning process. And finally, my advice for anyone who has an Interlink program or an international program at their center or are interested in implementing their own Interlink or international program at their speaking center. So with that being said, let's get started. I would say that I have built pretty strong rapport with most of the international students that I've worked with. A lot of the Arabic and South American women that I work with give me the little air kisses. So like they greet me with those. I guess it's like a cultural thing. Also, one of the Interlink students that I work with very frequently brought me a pear a few weeks ago. And they always approach me on campus when they see me out. They ask me how I am. And typically, if I see them first, I always try to be the one to initiate that conversation. But sometimes I'm in a hurry, I'm on my way to class, and I basically have no peripheral vision, right? So sometimes I can't always be the first one, but I do remember faces, and I do try to talk to them and ask them how their life is. And something that I've noticed works for me in building connections with international students and Interlink students is honestly just sharing my own stories with them and self-disclosure as well. So for example, a few weeks ago, I worked with an Interlink student. She's from Saudi Arabia. I'd never worked with her before. And I just asked her, I said, what did you do last weekend? And she said, you know, I don't really like to go out, but I like to stay home and watch Netflix. And I said, okay, so what are your favorite TV shows to watch? What are your favorite movies? Well, what do you like? And we got to talking, and again, she's from Saudi Arabia, but she told me her favorite movie is a German film. And she watches a lot of Spanish movies. She watches American movies. She watches Korean movies. And through our conversation, we learned that we had both seen the same Korean drama. I used to be really into Korean dramas about a couple years ago. And so we found something that connected us, something that we both had interest in. And from there, it really opened up a dialogue and created that bond between us, you know? And since then, she told me that Game of Thrones is her favorite TV show, and I'm going to watch it. I watched one of the episodes a few years back, and I didn't love it, but I told my new friend Amani that I was going to watch a few episodes, and we're going to talk about it next time she comes in. And so, honestly, just talking about certain interests and sharing your own stories as well can really help you to make that bond with international students and kind of get over any kind of barriers that we might perceive are there and they might perceive are there, you know? So finding common interest. And however, with this being said, I would also say be mindful not to speak more than them in a consultation, because that kind of defeats the purpose of interlink consultations, right? So this was something that I noticed myself doing a lot when I first started at the UNCG Speaking Center a couple years ago. And so I felt myself oversharing or kind of being too overpowering in the consultation. And of course, as I said earlier, that's problematic because then they're not speaking as much, they're not practicing as much, and they're not going to be progressing as much. And so be mindful that there's equal sharing time or they're speaking a little bit more than you. And with this being said, I would say try to avoid any long pauses in between. Pauses are fine, like if you ask them a question and they're trying to figure out how to say it, they're translating it. Those are fine, but if you have very long pauses where you feel like the conversation is just not there, then that would be something to try and avoid. And I always just say, come prepared with like questions to ask them and stories to share and things like that, because that can make it awkward for you and the speaker. And it can also make coming to Interlink maybe a little boring for the speaker as well. And so we want to make sure that Interlink and international students are having positive experiences with us as well. And my suggestion in the aspect of giving feedback is to politely point out when they're pronouncing something wrong. And so this was something that I really struggled with for a long time. I said, well, how do I say this? I don't know. And there are ways that the way that I have done it now is I listen to them speak. And if I hear something, I'll say, you know, another way that you can say this is me too, for example. I had a speaker who would say, also me. And I would say, you know, some way that you can say this is me too. And she was like, oh, yes, I know, I always forget. And so things like that, if you say it in a different way, if you say it politely, then they'll be more receptive to that. And also not just focusing on things that they're doing incorrectly, but also focusing on their competencies, focusing on if they're making eye contact with you, focus on their nonverbals, if they're open, and their facial expressions and things like that. And so I always try to make it positive as well. And so with that being said, I am going to move on to my next topic. So now I'm going to talk about fun and interesting ways that we can engage Interlink students and talk to them during our consultations. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is virtual reality. Some of you may have heard about this. The first time we heard about this was at this very conference about a year ago, and that is what inspired us to start using virtual reality in our consultations with Interlink students. And basically what virtual reality is, I'm going to pass it around in a second. I just have to make sure it's turned on. Basically what what virtual reality is you download an app onto your phone, and so does the Interlink student, and you can just literally go on virtual adventures with them. I've used this a few times in my consultations, and what it does is it opens up a dialogue for you. It makes it easy to generate conversation with them, And instead of them just telling you about their country, they can actually show you their country. So that's pretty cool. So this is the one that I use the most. Miranda's going to pass it around. So there's a lot of different options that you can choose from for virtual reality. They have roller coasters, they have games, they have travel, as I said before. And the one that I passed around is Moon. So it's like on the moon, you're like looking around space, things like that. So virtual reality is something that always gets a conversation started when I use it. And we always end up laughing and having really interesting conversations when I've used it in the past. We do try to limit virtual reality to 10 minutes. So you shouldn't be using virtual reality for more than 10 minutes, and then the rest of the time you should be discussing it. Another thing to keep in mind about virtual reality is potential triggers. So be mindful of the apps that you choose, because certain things might trigger certain Interlink students. So a specific country might, or we don't know what their triggers could be, so just be mindful of the apps that you choose if you are thinking about using virtual reality. Another thing that we do at the Speaking Center is Let's Talk, and Let's Talk is basically an hour-long session that we host once a week. And basically what it is we play a lot of games, we talk, of course, but mainly we play a lot of games. And what this does is it just gets Interlink students comfortable speaking in front of other people. And for example, because it is a group setting, it might be a little less intimidating than an international or an Interlink student coming in one-on-one. And, they can bring a friend if they want, or they might run into someone else from their class who's there. And so it's a very cohesive and comfortable setting for the speaker. I co-led Let's Talk last fall with 2 of the grad coordinators that we have at the Speaking Center. Miranda was one of them. And I couldn't this semester due to my schedule, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And something that I've noticed that Let's Talk helps with the most, in my opinion, is vocabulary expansion. So I remember we had one speaker in our class named Carlos, and I think he graduated from the Interlink program. He was in a higher level. And I just noticed after he started coming to Interlink that his vocabulary had expanded very immensely. And so that's something that I really feel like Let's Talk helps with a lot. We play a lot of games, Hangman. I remember we played charades once. That was a lot of fun. And we play a lot of category games. I also brought a game that we can play today to give you a little taste of what Let's Talk is like. Okay, who would like to volunteer for me? Wonderful. Okay, so this is the rules of the game. There is a bunch of categories on this beach ball. So let's see, let me read it. Weather, Greensboro, English language, American culture, cooking, driving. So what's your name?
Ashley.
I am going to throw this to Ashley. And I'm going to say, Ashley, tell me about driving in your country.
In my country, driving is something you can start doing when you're 16. You can get a license, and you can drive from this point.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to throw it to somebody else, Ashley?
No, I really do.
Oh.
Oh, okay. I'm not like you're just like
Cooking.
Okay.
It depends what part of the country you're in. We have a bunch of different, food groups in the country. Southern food, we have northern food. It kind of depends what part of the region you're in.
Great. Yeah. So this is, we can throw it to everybody else. Y'all can continue playing if you'd like. We'll do one more.
All right, Greensboro. That's where I'm going to college right now, UNCG. It's great. Try it out, And yeah, I love it.
Great.
I don't feel like I was just holding it.
Okay, so this is a really fun and interactive way that Interlink students and international students can get comfortable speaking in front of other people.
I just want to interject really quick. But also, Let's Talk is a way for them to be able to speak with people who speak at a faster rate than others. Because in a consultation, if it's just you and one other person, then sometimes you may speak a little slower so that they can understand. But in a group setting, everyone's kind of just thinking about other things and not how fast or how slow. So it gives them an opportunity to be able to just hear the way people say different things, the same words, or just get used to a different way of speaking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, just a question about the Let's Talk. How long do the sessions normally last for that, since it's a group?
It's an hour long.
An hour? Oh,
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of
How
course.
many people usually come to those groups?
How many
How
people?
many people come? Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
Interlink is, I think, every 6 weeks.
Mhm.
So maybe the first 2 weeks we get like 4 or 5 people, and then we're like communicating with the professors. Hey, make sure you send your students. So then we'll get a group of like 8, 9, or 10, and then the semester will change, so it'll slow down again, and then it'll build back up. A lot of times we get a lot of the same people coming back. And so we try to encourage them to bring their friends, just so that they're comfortable and we can add more people.
Yeah.
Question?
So when you first started this program, like, did you kind of just ask for professors to spread the word, or how did you get people to come?
Well, the Interlink. Oh, I'm sorry. Did anyone else want to answer? Okay. So Interlink is it's a program through UNCG. So we've just been in communication with their faculty. Their faculty really appreciate the service that we offer because we really cater to the needs of the speakers. So we try to just stay in communication with the different faculty. Every 6 weeks, we get a new roster with all of the people who've moved up within the levels or new people that they've added. So we just try to stay in communication that way. And then have them bring friends and family, because sometimes like a husband and they'll have their wife, but they don't go to that school. They can still bring their wife or their friends, things like that.
Do you have different levels of like the Let's Talk? Because I know like you were saying that they move up the levels. There's some that have newly come to this university, and there's others that have been there for a long time, know how to speak it more. How do you kind of situate that?
Usually it's just by activity. It's not by levels. So if we notice that some people aren't up to speed as other people, we'll make sure to include them, or try to do activities that gear towards things that they can do and they can say. I know Charlotte has an example of a story of Google Earth when they use that. You want to share that story?
Yeah, sure. So another grad assistant that I work a lot with, whenever she's working a lot with Interlink International visiting students, she will always sit down and use to her advantage, like, okay, so I'm going to pull up Google Earth and I'm going to show you around where we are. Do you recognize any of these buildings? And then she's going to go ahead and ask them, like, hey, can I have your address? And let's go explore where you're from. So that kind of is something that's really cool and engaging, that gets them excited to talk about where they're from and just excited to continue the conversation and keep on speaking in English and becoming engaged. And it's one of those ways that we can go ahead and continue the conversation in English, continue their engagement, and not have to worry so much about those awkward pauses that might occur within a consultation or within a group setting even as well. Yes.
First of all, I'm loving this. I have a question. If you're gonna answer this later, that's totally fine. You can just stop me. But we're kind of curious, or I at least speaking for myself, I'm kind of curious is how you guys, or if you guys have issues with students coming in and kind of overestimating your ability to help with language. Like we struggle from time to time with students who are very understandably confused on what degree we're able to help them with language. Like we are not experts in the English language, like we're just public speaking consultants. We don't really know how to draw that line, and we never ever want to or never do turn people away, but how do you navigate like not necessarily being qualified or equipped to help them with certain things?
Yeah, that is definitely a thing that happens. Feel free to interject. But a lot of times some of that problem is that the Interlink teachers will send them to us without a clear initiative. Right. So they expect that we can go ahead and help them with their presentations, completely doing their presentations. instead of more conversational, or they don't understand that they have to make a separate appointment or tell us specifically that they want to work with a presentation as compared to a discussion-based type of meeting.
Yeah.
Other times there is that disjointedness in their English language that they simply don't understand that we can't always do what they want us to do. Like our school, I'm sure that your schools have it too, have an honor code. We have policies that we cannot violate because it's the honor of our work that is worth something, and it is getting our grades and all of that stuff. So we can't do their presentation for them.
Yeah.
I've definitely run into situations where I've had an Interlink student kind of push me his notebook and be, does this good? Like, I'm trying to help you as best as I can, but I can't look at your sentence, even though the words are flipped around and what you're trying to say. Like, I think that I know what you're going, but I'm not sure. I could only try to reword things with you vocally. I can't write it down. So that's some of the issues that I know that I've run into a lot of times with our Interlink students. I'm not sure if you guys have any other situations that would stand out.
This is actually making me think of another job I have on campus of working with students in an English lab where I work with their written English. So what I do in that, and I sometimes do that as well in the speaking listening center, but is working with them and actually leading them to find those answers themselves. So, and I think it could definitely be applied to like the speaking, but in the writing portion, if I have a verb tense issue and I recognize I have many verb tense issues or singular and plural, what I'll do is I'll put VP, or sorry, I'll just put verb tense VT, and then later on I'll say I want you to find the verb tense issue in the sentence. So something like that where they're the ones finding the errors themselves. So somehow trying to incorporate it into a way where they can correct it themselves, not only in their written but also in their oral.
And I think another issue that maybe we face at times is having that language barrier. Just because if we are, speak English and someone from Saudi Arabia comes or they speak a different language, if they can't understand clearly what we're saying and then vice versa, it can be very confusing. Then if they come into the consultation, their guard could be up. So maybe they don't want to open up to us or be receptive to building that relationship. So I think something that I do, and I'm sure a lot of people, we have a routine of if we do have a interlink or exchange student, for me, I'll be how's your day? Is there anything that you like to get off your chest, or did something happen today, or how's the weather? Is it different in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan? And I feel asking these questions, it can ease the tension of the language barrier and decrease their guard. Because last week I had this one lady, she came in, and I think from hearing her story, it gave me a different perspective of going into a consultation with an international student. She was just saying that she's been here for 3 weeks, and her husband were so scared and nervous to come over here because of media of what America is portrayed as over there. So she didn't know if she was going to be judged, discriminated, or just all this stuff because of what's been going on in media and just with the government. So she was just disclosing to me she was nervous, but being at UNCG, there's so many nice people. So connecting with that person of how's your day? Is there something you want to vent about? I'm a social work major, y'all, so I'm all about emotions and connecting with people. So I would say definitely one of our difficulties is the language barrier and trying to break that guard down. With us, we have guards up all the time. So taking the time to be oh, how are you? It feels really good. Yeah.
Is there somewhere else that y'all can refer these students to if it's something that you can't help them with?
Yeah. So for me, say they come in and they want to give a presentation or working on the organization. I'm not a good writer and grammar person. So if I need to be hey, you want to, we have services at UNCG that does help with writing. So we have the writing center that's right beside us. So like, you know, a lot of times we'll just be like, yeah, we can't necessarily help you in this area, but right beside of us is the writing center, and they'll love to help you. What are some other places?
Same thing with the digital media commons. So if they come in and they're practicing for a presentation, and I can tell that their PowerPoint, like the colors are really strong, or the font and the grammar on the PowerPoint isn't correct, since we don't focus mainly on that, I refer them to the digital media commons area and have them make an appointment with them so that they can not only like be confident with their speech, but also with their PowerPoint as well.
And another useful place that for these individuals that might need support and might need to vent a little bit more could possibly be like the student health center and getting some therapy and just someone else who will listen to them, even if it's not so much discussion based. That way they can kind of talk about their worries, talk about other things that maybe they wouldn't be comfortable with peers or disclosing to someone who's a little bit closer to what they're trying to accomplish going to school and learning English. I have had moments where there's kind of been an imbalance with cultural differences, kind of along the lines of what Tam was saying, where I know that I've definitely been a part of trying to explain something, but them taking offense because they think that it's something cultural. They think that I'm coming after their culture or doing something that's offending them. And that is so high stakes to me that I definitely had to go get the manager and be like, I'm not saying this, but I don't know how to come across. Mm-hmm. So just that patience, that takes a while to establish. That trust is so important because when an issue like this does occur, you don't want it to blow up. You don't want this to prevent them from coming again. You don't want this to prevent them from learning more English and being inspired and opening up. So that's another difficulty that could occur, that if they don't want to explain why this is such a problem or why this is offensive to them, I can't really help or change because they can't explain themselves. Yeah. And that's happened periodically, and it's been brought to our attention periodically that I was just sitting in class, and because I'm a junior consultant, I'm just now starting to lead individually, so it's a little scary. I think that these are one of the scarier consultations for me because it's hard enough in English, honestly. Yeah. So trying to interact with people that don't speak English natively and trying to help them as best as I can and trying to understand what they need help with too, without them necessarily inherently saying what it is. Sometimes I don't understand that I'm doing things wrong. Honestly, it happens at UNCG. You know, it's a diverse campus, and sometimes I say something. Whoopsies. But I learned the other day in class that, and for some people of the Islamic faith, that playing cards signify gambling. So don't use that to group people together, because that's sinful and you can't do that. So just being aware of cultural differences gives you a completely different perspective. And that's completely valuable to us as consultants, us as individuals, and us as people that live here. In such a polar environment, we want to be able and open to as many people that we could possibly help, as many topics as we could possibly touch on, and as many things as we could possibly learn. So I think that those are some values that we get out of these consultations. For however difficult they are, we now have this global perspective that we can utilize to learn about their lives and have them learn about our lives. And that while we have differences, we aren't all that different. It's just a matter of interpreting where they might be as compared to where we are. And we're all trying to even the battlefield. So
and there are two things that I'd like to add. Going off of what Charlotte said, I would suggest if you are in a situation like that where you feel like you may have accidentally, unknowingly offended an international student or an Interlink student, that's when I approach Interlink and international consultations, that's when I focus on my nonverbals the most. So that's when I make sure that I'm always smiling. I make sure that I'm using the right tone. And that way, I don't typically run into those predicaments as much. And so definitely we're being mindful of your nonverbals, the way that you're speaking to them, making sure that you're not closed off or anything like that. And also, of course, as Charlotte said, being aware of different cultural norms, but also being aware that maybe it doesn't apply to everyone in that specific group. So for example, Muslims. There may be some Muslims that are very religious, and there may be some that still consider themselves to be Muslim, but aren't as religious and don't adhere as strictly to some of those practices that the other ones do, you know? And so there's different levels, and I think that to avoid things like that, you know, just to tuck away any kind of preconceived notions that we have of Interlink students of different groups, and make sure that we are creating a comfortable environment for them, creating an environment that feels friendly and safe for them to share as well. The second thing I was going to talk about was to answer your question very late when you said something about how do you deal with situations when international students and Interlink students come to us and kind of overestimate what we offer, how we can benefit them. And I have to say, I have never felt as if I feel like I know nothing about the English language when I am speaking to Interlink students and international students. And I'll tell you why. Because they'll ask me for specific definitions of things, and I'll say, well, I don't know. Like, I'll have to go look it up. So we'll Google it. Because, you know, we use our language so much, and we say specific things. So when somebody asks me what it means or how to use it in a sentence or why we use it like that, I don't really have the answers because I'm so used to that's just the way we speak, you know? And so I'll always say that to them, you know, I'm not an expert. I'm just here to, you know, practice with you, get you comfortable speaking to somebody who does speak English. Do you have a question?
I want to make a comment. I was going to say that kind of like shows them like the cultural problem solving as well. So like if they don't know, or if you don't know something, they can be like, oh, well, like I can always do what she did and go on Google, like type thing.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, that's something that I feel like helps with that. Just disclosing at the beginning, you know, I'm not an expert and I am learning just as you are. And so maybe not, you don't have to state that at the beginning of every consultation, but just letting it be known if you feel like they're like asking you something that you aren't trained in.
Yeah, and going off of Charlotte's, basically, you know, getting to know different cultural differences, I think this opens up a great approach for doing outreach at campuses, because not only by, you know, educating yourself by looking up on the internet, but also by going to events, getting to meet these students outside of the center, forming those relationships. Because I think when students see a face that's familiar to them, they're more likely to come to the center. And so I've been tutoring for 3 years, and the first year I was a consultant. I didn't work directly with international students. I knew a few students and was friends with a few students, but it wasn't really until my junior year that I worked with many international students, over 60 in the summertime before the year. And I had 2 or 3 one that came every week for the whole semester, and then I had 2 that kind of every other week that came. But I honestly don't think that they would have come unless they had the chance to know me, because by seeing somebody that they know is going to like be responsive to them in a good way, just someone who's nice and friendly. I think that's really, really great. And so this past year, we kind of took that approach, and we went into classrooms and we had 5 students kind of mock what a session might look like, because you're kind of making the unknown known to them, what a session looks like, you know. And also we had 2 international students who are consultants come to the center, and so students can see themselves going to the center, but they can also like be encouraged and inspired to maybe become consultants themselves. So I think that's an awesome thing for them to do. So really just take the initiative to meet your students outside of the center and, you know, do stuff like that they really enjoy to do.
And I would say, like, to piggyback off of Sarah, in terms of like how I was before, like well, before and after. Like now, before I didn't want to work with international students. I feel like there was that barrier. I felt like they're not gonna understand what I'm saying, so why even try? Because I don't know if you're like me, but like I don't like change, and I'm from a small town in the country, and we don't like have like people who are Muslim, people who are people like from different countries and stuff like that, like Black, white, Hispanic, you're Christian. And so coming here, I was like, okay, that's something that I need to learn about, because I feel like if you are not exposed, you can be more ignorant. And I feel like at first I was like, do you want this? Like, people are, because I didn't grow up that way. And I feel like it's just a blessing to have diversity, to be equipped to know how to talk to them and, work on, building that rapport with them. Because you never know what people are dealing with, and I feel like taking the time out to be like, oh, how's your day? Like I said before, just getting to know them, building that relationship, just like Sarah said, like that's going to bring them back, and you want that. What if they don't have anyone here to connect with? They come to us, like maybe like a counselor, I don't know, but that's social work that's coming out. You're like, I don't have anyone to support me or advocate for me, so let me go to the speaking center. Let me feel that support, that encouragement, because if we're not empowered, just like yesterday, we can't empower anyone else. So that's just a piggyback off of
I think in many ways, like the Speaking Listening Center is a way to like kind of be not only a tutor, but also kind of a mentor and even a friend. You're forming these relationships. The students are coming back, but I always have students who send me messages on Facebook after sessions. Just questions in general, like, oh, I think I'm gonna apply for this job. Like, what do you think I should do? Like, can you help me with the interview? So you're like forming these relationships, but they start to like really trust you and like they want to come see you, and like they really believe in like the work that you do, but they see you as like a friend. I think that's so special.
Piggybacking off of what Sarah just said, some of the things that we like to focus on in our consultations are their grammar or words that they need for pronunciation or help. And we found that just being able to make that connection with them allows them to open up to us more and be more receptive when we try to correct certain things. So on our report forms that we have, and Tam's going to talk about that a little bit, we have a section where we write down certain words that maybe they need to practice more pronunciation on. And if you notice yourself starting to actually build a relationship with these people, you notice that they're like, did I say that right? Or maybe we should write this word down. So they're becoming actively involved in their own learning. And you can just tell that it makes their experience in learning English like that much better.
So with the ones, I gave some tables out. So there wasn't enough. So like if y'all just want to like pass it around, you can. But one of the first one, at the top it says CSB 1, 2, and 3 conversation. And for those, it's kind of like the 4 and 5, but we talk about their competency. So if you felt that they portrayed, I guess, eye contact, hand gestures, if they felt, or if you felt that they were able to keep up with the conversation very fluid, like had a good flow, you would put that, or at the bottom where it asks for opportunities, say the speaker that you're speaking to needs help in terms of the past and present tense. So if you're talking about something and they said, I eated this, something like I eated pizza, that's going to click to you, be like, okay, well, let me write down I ate this and explain why, past tense and present tense and stuff like that. And then at the bottom where it says other, maybe you say work on pronunciation or come back to the speaking center, almost here. And then the second one is the CS4 and 5. So this is the more advanced Interlink students. And it's kind of the same as in the competencies demonstrated than the opportunities. At the bottom, it has look these words up for pronunciation. So like sometimes if I'm working with a student, they may say, instead of clock, just because I looked at the clock, they may say cloak, or just certain words, and I would just write it down, like look up how to say this or that. So maybe next time we work together, I'll be like, so how do you say that word or something like that? And they're like, clock. And then the next one is just verb tense confusion. So in terms of that, it could just be like I'm jumping instead of jumping, putting that past tense of jumped and not jumping, having that confusion. So if you want to write that down, and our goal is just to like work with the students and set them up for success. So if anyone else wants to like interject or like how you do it at,
Yeah, so I have students with the pilot program. In the first few weeks, I had students, come how I say different foods in the cafeteria, or how do I get involved in classroom conversation, and kind of like doing things like, how to make notes where you're able to, draw off these notes or draw off ideas like in questions that you've had the night before that you feel ready to jump in. So things like that. But as far as making it more fun, I had a student who told me, I want to like mimic real life conversation environments. He's like, can we go for a walk? And I'm like, yeah. And before that, I had never really thought of the Speaking Listening Center outside of the space. But I think it's like a really great idea because, it's sometimes students don't get a whole lot of time to just walk or like do exercise. So you're, going on a walk, but, maybe in that walk, you can talk about this house that's your favorite on campus, or you can talk about the ice cream place that you just passed by. So, those environments can make you think of different things to talk about that you didn't originally think of to talk about in the center. And then one other thing is I try to be creative in the ways that you approach different like kind of goals from the students. So I had a student who wanted to work on being able to identify uncommon words in sentences. And we had an idiom book that had it basically where it would have the sentence and you get the context, and then there would be the underlying idiom, like I'm going to bow out of this meeting or something like that. And then there would be four different words that you could put into that as far as meaning. And then so I covered up those four words that it could be. I'm like, what do you think it means first? Like from the context, what do you think? And then so just doing it kind of in a fun way where, now I see her, I'm like, oh my gosh. So like there's this other idiom I forgot to tell you about, but like pulling my leg, or like, you just, when you see them on campus, give a new idiom. It's kind of just fun. But I think that's one of my favorite things is like the idiom book. But you just have things in the center, definitely. Like we have games, have things that you can draw, like use at your convenience based on what the student wants to do. That's it.
We also have an example of that Charlotte's going to tell you about.
So just in case you ever run into a barrier of absolutely nothing to talk about, because that happens too. you sometimes you'll just be in a consultation and someone's like, snow, it was nice. We don't have that where I am. Yeah. So we do kind of have this prompt sheet that's talking about like, tell me about this. So we have different things where it's like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your childhood. What about your goals? And then you can also extend this even further as to, okay, can you tell me about your morning habits? Can you tell me about what you normally prepare for dinner? And it's these prompts that you can kind of go off of that's not like a standard conversation of, hey, how is your day today? But a little bit more focused on something that they can easily reflect on, because these are things that they're doing repetitive habitually and things that maybe they want to give a voice to too. And it's something that's important to kind of keep in mind that, yes, we're practicing ordering food on the phone, but why don't you tell me a little bit about why this is your favorite type of food? And things like that also help with understanding how we phrase different things and understanding a little bit more with the global competencies of, okay, like then it makes sense why maybe you pronounced it this way. Or, oh, it kind of makes sense why, like your lunch kind of looks the way that it does, just because you're learning a little bit more about them. We also have something similar with the idiom sheet. I know that was my biggest issue when I first sat down. I said an idiom that I didn't realize was an idiom, and the appeasement crossed her face immediately. She went, mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no, that is not a good look, because they're so excited and want to take as much as they possibly can in, especially at CS 4-5 level, because they're almost there. But as soon as you say something that's just a little off-putting for them, they're like, mm-hmm. And then it's like a blank look, and you're gonna have to take a step back, try to fit it in a different sentence, and go ahead and try to fix it, or give them that challenge of, hey, can you try and use that idiom back to me? Like, does it make sense to you? And kind of have it as like a teaching learning, where you can always apply this with retaining information yourself. I know that I do it in my other classes where we are taught something and we sit down and teach it to our pet dog. Just kind of have that moment of letting them, after having been taught it, teach it back to you, because then it's more likely to stick. They're more likely to retain more information. It's more likely to be applicable to them as well. And being able to talk more about what they're doing, why it is that we're so interested in them, and having them teach it back too, kind of envelops that whole family setting, that they're comfortable enough away from home, that they're comfortable enough to come back to you as a speaking center, that they're comfortable enough to start engaging in class discussions, that they're more comfortable to even jump right in and be like, that was wrong, wasn't it? Can you help me with this? And taking that time to go ahead and discovering, okay, we're starting that awareness track, that you are working hard to learn even more about what you are supposed to as it is. Another thing that we kind of do in the speaking center is that we have a 3-time rule, where for more exposure and help that they can get is that they can request the same consultant 3 times in a row, and then they have to change. The value in that is that you all of a sudden get used to their accent. You get used to the way that they phrase things, that all of a sudden you stop catching things and working on things to correct, and are more comfortable just facilitating a regular discussion, which is valuable in and of itself, practicing. But you also want to give the opportunity to another consultant to be able to be like, wait a second, have you been saying it that way this entire time? Like, I know as a consultant, I'm more likely to catch pronunciations as opposed to verb tenses. To be super excited to work with me, I can be like, hey, there's another consultant that works during this time. You might want to request her. That way it gives other consultants more exposure to different people, and they don't tell you the same stories over and over again. So it's exciting for more cultural and global knowledge for other consultants. And it's also better for them to get more feedback on what they do that you might not pick up as a normal consultant as well. I think that one of my first consultations with an Interlink student was actually, hey, so there's another consultant. You mind if I give her to you? Who are you? Kind of that moment of panic of like, wait, like you didn't request me? Like I was told. But that's the whole starting over again, getting more excited to speak about your country and being able to teach more and learn more and practice more. And that's super valuable, that we go ahead and take into consideration as a speaking center at UNC Greensboro too.
Before I answer your questions, I just want to say one thing, and then we can move into strictly questions. But one thing that we also do to keep track of what has been talked about previously, we have folders with the person's name on it. And if they're an Interlink, we have their level. And if they're an exchange student, then we just note that as well. And so in this folder, we keep a sheet of the date, the consultant, and everything that has been talked about that day. That way, if they do switch consultants and they have to work with someone new, they're not always talking about the same thing. Because eventually they're going to get tired of explaining, well, I like to eat this is where I'm from, this is my family. So we just like to keep that information so that each time that they come to us, they're talking about something different.
Can I just say one more thing,
Mm-hmm.
even though...
No, you're there.
The one thing that I want you all to remember as we are concluding is that this demographic has the potential to be reached. And being patient, being present, being engaging, and being creative are all essential to helping them reach their personal goals and helping them on their English learning journey. So, every moment is a teaching moment, and take advantage of that.
Questions?
So this is kind of for about idioms and everything like that. So I know that I've worked with a student before. We talked about idioms and slang was a big thing. We were just talking about different slang words. And he's from Japan, and he said, well, what does "that's what she said" mean? And I'm just curious have you guys had that happen before where you handle that, how awkward, let's keep talking about something.
Yeah, so I had to deal with that whenever I was training for the class. So I was shadowing, and one of the guys is from Japan. And I think he was an African-American class, and the teacher, they were talking about driving while black. So he asked that, and at that time, I didn't know what it meant. And he was like, so what does DWB mean? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I have no idea. And so he said, and I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. Am I being attacked or do I just need to tell him? So I feel like in that situation, don't take it as like a bad thing necessarily. Just, that you can shed light to it. And don't take it so seriously. Try to laugh it off. Something like that. But of course, acknowledge the situation and be upfront and honest with them or her or whoever you work with. And I think that they will receive it better than someone who's well, blah, 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 So that's what I would say. Just be calm about it, but just know that it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. If I were in that situation, I would probably say something along the lines of, oh, that's a dirty thing. That's a dirty thing that people say.
Google it.
Yeah.
Google it when you get home.
Ask one of their friends. Yeah. I would feel uncomfortable explaining that specific idiom to an international student. Personally, yes.
So earlier it was brought up about mimicking real life conversation environments, and I was wondering besides the walk that you took with that student, have you done this with other students? Have you thought about maybe implementing this in your center more? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess he suggested that to me. I was like, yeah, let's do that. But I think definitely mimicking real life conversation environments. I think it can happen outside the center as well. So your role in the center, but then when you see them at an event, just talk to them and have them practice in that environment, I think. But, I think having these questions or if they have an event that they're going to or a dorm, party, what are some things that you might say to your friends, where they can kind of be ready for that specific situation? Is there anything that you want to work on for this week? Any social gatherings? Something like that, I think might be a good way for them to prepare.
Yes. Can you guys elaborate on ways that you interact with them that aren't necessarily verbal? Because we were all discussing that. I resonate with what Joyce said when sometimes you don't realize it because you're so ingrained about how to explain something. So I feel in my experience, there's certain things where you laugh it off, but you draw or you pull something up on Google or your showing does better than telling at times because admitting you may not know it, you may need to look it up. Can you guys explain or describe some of your experiences, whether they be those or other ones where you have to do that and it actually works rather than just saying this is how you say it or whatever?
I spell things out phonetically a lot where I was trying to work with someone on their presentation and he was saying the good things about corn change. And obviously I have no idea what's going on. This is obviously science. And yes, I'm a science major, but what? But so let's start at the beginning. Good things. okay, that's benefit, especially because the next one was bad things of change corn. So I'm like, okay, well, I can teach you this phrase that cuts down how wordy you're trying to use this. So I said benefit, and then he went benefit, and I was like, be, draw it out, dash, ne, dash, fit. And then I would point at each section, have him repeat it a couple of times, and then try to say the sentence over again. And that retention kind of helps spelling it out phonetically. But it's also kind of that moment of you aren't doing the work, you're technically rephrasing it better. And by writing it out, saying it, spelling it, allows them to kind of see the interaction of each syllable of the word.
And yes.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I guess the way that I interact with Interlink students is I will sound things out. So I guess Charlotte is more visual. She'll write it out and I will speak it to you instead. So for example, I had an Interlink student who was pronouncing her G's like Z's. So I was like, okay, well, let's take a step back. Let's try and practice the G sound. So G. So we started talking about, things that had a hard G at the front, goods, things like that, to kind of get her in the routine of practicing saying that like a G instead of a Z. So I do things more sound-based.
Last question.
Do you have anyone who works at either of the centers that is like bilingual or from? Okay, I'm wondering what that experience is like because I'm from a family of immigrants and I personally struggle working with international students because I have a hard time like noticing things because I'm so used to, my family members not really having, all those skills. And so I'm wondering if you guys notice anything like similar to that or something completely different.
I feel like as like a language learner myself, I'm a Spanish speaker, Spanish learner, and I think it really kind of makes me like recognize how awesome they're doing. I think it makes you really appreciate it, and I think as consultants, we need to like really have them encourage them and talk about how great they're doing because I went to Chile and it was like really hard to take all my classes in Spanish, things like that, and just to constantly talk about how great they're doing and the improvement. But I think as a language learner, I think you're sometimes more aware of some of the things, or it kind of changes the way that you interact with them. So for me, like I really value when people correct my Spanish because that's how I learn. But I always ask before, like what do you want from me? What do you want me to do in the session? Because if I'm in a like maybe somebody doesn't respond well to that, so I always ask first, like this is what I really value when like improving my Spanish. Could I do this with you? But then be selective with the things that you correct because you don't want to constantly, like this verb tense was this, or because then you interfere with the flow of the conversation. So definitely, but I think it definitely has influenced the way that I do my work. I don't know about
And can I say one thing about that as well? I am not one of the bilingual consultants that we have, so I can't really speak from that perspective, but I know where you're coming from when you're saying, you're used to some people talking with not perfect English, and it doesn't seem like it's a very big deal to us. Yeah, and it's difficult to notice, but when they're coming to us, that's when you're kind of, even if you have to get kind of a little nitpicky, where you have to get your mindset in, what is this verb tense correct, or is the pronunciation correct? That's kind of the way that I go into the consultations beforehand to kind of help me mentally prepare for that. Yeah, of course.
And I just said one thing. I just want to say, go in knowing what you want to get out of the consultation. So if like you have trouble picking up on verb tense, say, okay, today in this consultation, I'm going to focus on listening for verb tense. And so if you already go in with the preconceived notion of what you want to accomplish, it'll help you like pay closer attention to those things.
Yeah, I just kind of want to speak to what Ashley was asking a little bit. So I am to some degree bilingual, English being my first language, and I think anyone in here that has learned a language like other than English with English being their first language, can agree that learning a new language teaches you a lot about your first language. So I find that, like, I know you guys are talking a little bit about, well, we don't exactly know how to explain why words are the way they are because it's just what we know.
Yeah.
Kind of going through the motions of learning a foreign language helps you be able to double back and explain to them because you understand the perspective that they're coming from. I don't know if that makes sense, but learning a second language definitely teaches you why English is kind of structured the way that it is. And it helps you also to understand why their language might be structured the way that it is as well, even if the language you speak is a different language.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that.
And going off of that, also asking them about their language, because maybe if they tell you about the structure of their language, maybe by simply knowing that structure, you can know what to look for.
Right.
So I think that just talking with Chinese students and stuff like that, I've kind of been okay, well now I can kind of maybe look for certain the structure different because that's how it is in Chinese.
Like in French and Spanish, you would say things backwards than you would in English.
Yeah.
But understanding that's why they keep kind of doing that. Instead of saying Janine's house, they would see house Janine. It's because that's what they're used to their language. You can understand that kind of concept.
All right. Do we have any last questions? No. All right. Well, thank you guys for
Yeah. Oh, it's my
You did a really great job.